First, I'm going to go over how I warped this griddle behind me. Then I'm going to tell you what Blackstone, Camp Chef, and Traeger say about how a griddle warps and how to fix a warped griddle. And then finally, I'll give you my opinion on like how I cook going forward and what things I still do, but what things I avoid doing to hopefully not make it happen again. So I put a partially frozen 5-pound log of beef on this griddle behind me when it was like rip roaring hot. I went inside and did the prep and left this on too long, and I didn't temp it, but I would say it was probably over 500 degrees by the time I put this log of beef on there. And about a minute after I put it on there, this thing started popping and like coming up, and it was probably, I don't know, a good 3 to 4 inches up off there warping, and I just shut it all off. It's kind of scary. I didn't know like if welds were gonna pop off, or I don't know what was gonna happen. And I shut it off and just kind of left it alone, and then it just slowly went back down. Took about a half hour. So it hasn't had any problems since. It did go back. It does have like a slight little lean to it now, but nothing that's like unmanageable or like completely terrible. So, but it definitely, you know, was my fault for letting it get so hot and then putting like a really cold piece of beef on there. And that's how I warped this griddle behind me. So according to Camp Chef's website, and that's who made this griddle that I warped, there are 3 main ways you can warp a griddle. The first thing is heating it up too quickly by turning the burners on above medium and preheating it too quickly. That's why I usually try to preheat on medium low or low. The second one they say is only using a couple burners. So like you would turn 2 burners on and leave 2 burners off. So, and don't even turn them on. They say if you do that, you get to a high temperature on that one side, that can also lead to warping. Finally, they say if you get the griddle really hot and you put something very cold or partially frozen on there, it might warp. Ugh. Feels like they're specifically talking about me. Okay, that's exactly what I did. Let's go on to the next one. Blackstone says a griddle can warp if you, let me get the quote exactly, pour water over a hot griddle. It doesn't say how hot, it doesn't say anything about the water, it just says if you pour water over a hot griddle, it can lead to warping. It also says if you're using water for cleaning, to use small concentrated amounts and not just dump a bunch of water on there for cleaning. So it's interesting because it doesn't give you a ton of information like how hot is the griddle, what about the water, like just it's kind of vague in my opinion. And I know a lot of people clean the griddle with water, myself included. The second reason they say a griddle can warp is if you, let me read this, add large quantities of very cold or frozen meat. Okay, all right, we get the point. Okay, let's move on to Traeger. So Traeger's website first goes over the difference between warping and thermal deformation, which is $1 million word that is like way above my education level. But basically, thermal deformation, from what I understood, means it will just expand a little bit every time you heat it up. And so I think they're kind of saying like, hey, don't call us because your griddle is like 1 centimeter higher than it was before you turned it on. That's just my guess, I don't know. But they give 4 reasons for warping, and they are using a large amount of cold water for cleaning the cooktop. So that's a little more specific. A lot of water, it's very cold. They're saying don't do that. Trying to cool down your griddle by using cold water or ice cubes. So I've never done that on a residential griddle. I've done it on commercial griddles when I worked in diners or retirement communities, and those are big stainless steel griddles. We've dumped ice on there to clean them, but it's saying don't do that on a residential one, which makes sense. It's a thinner piece of metal. Number 3 is leaving a zone off while another zone is on. So that's the same, that was already referenced. It's saying like only turning on half the griddle. So everything's similar from these websites. And number 4 is placing frozen food on the cooktop or allow, okay, all right, okay. Now people are just picking on me, okay? So all the websites are pretty similar, as you would imagine. As for fixing the griddle once it warps, Blackstone's website says just continue to use it and it'll level back out. Traeger says pretty much the same thing, turn it on and in 30 minutes or so it should just level back out. Camp Chef recommends that you, if it is warped, which my Camp Chef did level itself back out, but it says if it won't go back, to get 2 big pots of water, put them on here, turn it on, slowly raise the temp until they're boiling, which that takes forever. I've tried that. It takes like 45, 50 minutes, but just slowly raise the temp. And then it says once they get close to boiling or simmering, turn it off, and hopefully the weight of the pots will level it back out. So that's their recommendation for, you know, trying to fix a warped griddle. And finally, I'll just go over what I do personally, like kind of, I don't know, just my way of trying to avoid it happening again and just what I do. So take this with a grain of salt. First, I don't preheat on high anymore. Like I said, I only preheat on medium or medium low. That way, if I walk away, it doesn't get too out of control on me. And then even if I'm making a steak or a smash burger and I want it to get to 500, after 5 to 10 minutes on medium, medium low, I'll go out and then I'll turn it up higher. And the best way to check that you haven't gotten your griddle too hot and that it won't accidentally warp on you is by using an infrared thermometer like this one from ThermoPro, who's the sponsor of today's video. This one's an infrared and probe, so you can check the griddle surface temperature and then the internal temperature of your food. It's a 2-in-1. That's why I like it. There's a link in the comments for 20% off if you want to get one for yourself. Second, I do still turn some burners off, to be honest with you. And they recommended not doing that, like not just turning the right half of the griddle on and leaving the left half off. But I do it after I preheated the whole griddle up. So I never just turn 2 of them on and not the other ones. I always turn all 4 of them on, no matter what. And then when they're kind of to my temp, I may cut 2 of them off. Also, to be honest with you, I rarely just do like left half on, right half off. If I'm turning off burners, it's usually 1 or 2 of the outside burners and I leave the middle 2 on. I have no idea if this makes sense, but I feel like it kind of still distributes the heat out instead of having half on, half off. Also, most of the time it's really just 1 burner. Usually it's an outside burner. I need to keep stuff warm, so I cut it off like midway through and move the bacon or potatoes over there or something, and it's still getting heat from the rest of the griddle. Or I turn it off and I'm gonna do the eggs there because I want the temperature lower, and it's still just one of the outside burners. And I turn it off, and that's also towards the end. That's not like the whole cook. I'm not going a full 25, 30 minutes with just 3 burners on and 1 off. So that's personal preference. You know, take that what you will with it and, you know, decide if it works for you. So water, I do clean it with water. Like I said, I've never dumped a ton of ice on there. I've never dumped a ton of cold water. I don't know how cold the water is. I would just say room temperature. I mean, just get it out of the tap and then it sits in my squirt bottle. How much do I use? I mean, as much as in the squirt bottle, but you know, I'm just squirting it on there and scrape it and squirt and scrape it. I'm not like dumping a bucket on there or a bunch of ice. I have put an ice cube on there to do an egg. I still do use a lot of water to steam cheese, steam eggs, like omelets, and to do broccoli. Like I did a bunch of broccoli for veggies and put them under the dome. So I still use water, just not a ton of cold water. Also, when it is come time to clean at the end, let's say it was all on high, I'm gonna turn it all down to low, let it kind of lower in temperature a bit and scrape everything down while it's lowering in temperature, then hit it with the water and scrape the water off. So I do use water, I just don't use a ton and it's never that cold. And finally, now frozen foods. Did I learn my lesson? Like, yes, I don't put partially frozen or fully frozen large hunks of meat on there. I've done tater tots and I've done French fries frozen. I've done frozen hash brown patties and they all work fine. Frozen potatoes, diced potatoes. I haven't had any problems with those. I did do a test with frozen burgers. I put about 16 of them on there for a party I had for my son's birthday, and I didn't have any problem. But I also put them on at like medium low. It was still 350 or whatever. I didn't like get it up to 500 and throw a bunch of them on there because I was a little worried. And it was this griddle that I used, the one that already warped on me. So I did put a bunch of frozen stuff on there, but I think it was just, you know, it's just that jump. They're just saying whenever there's a big jump in temperature is when it can warp. So the first time I had this probably really hot, like 500 degrees, and put a frozen log of beef on it. But then the next time when I did the frozen patties, the reason it didn't, I would assume, is because it was only around 325, 350, and then I put the frozen burger patties on there. So, you know, that's my 2 cents. I hope this is helpful. Hopefully this prevents you from having your griddle warp. If it does warp on you, contact the manufacturer would be the first thing that I would recommend. You don't know if it's covered, but at least put it on their radar, see what they can do for you. And they may have a better solution than what I did in my research of going to the different websites. So I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one and keep on griddling.